Hey, team players, welcome back to Breaking Down the Fantasy Football Conversation. We're going off ESPN's rankings as of June 3rd. We know they're going to change, but we're going to have this starting conversation. Today's episode are players 31 to 40. And Bob, to me, there's a guy on this list glaringly I would have considered in the second round, and I know I'd get made fun of, but I think he's going to be the number one receiver in football when it's all said and done, and that is Chris Olave. He finally has a quarterback that loves throwing the ball downfield. He's an amazing downfield player, and he's playing a schedule that cannot stop him. I think Olave is going to be a top 5 player when it's all said and done. He is 100% my sleeper in the rough, and if I can get him in the 4th round, doing it without even thinking before I look at that group. And yes, I see the other names on this list. I see Metcalf. I see T. Higgins, and I love me some T. Higgins. But that's how big I am on the Olave bus. We go through the other players on the list. There's 2 players here I don't want to even touch, Bob. I don't want Mixon or Javonta Williams. Javonta Williams is just, I can't trust his injury history. I don't think he's coming back and doing anything. Mixon on paper should have everything going for him, except for the fact that Cincinnati doesn't like it. So imagine if Cook ended up in Cincinnati. Oh, would that be crazy? Yeah. Even if they signed Hunt, I'd rather have Hunt over Mixon in Cincinnati. They just don't like him. He's a decent enough player, but we looked at last year, P. Ryan was doing just as good value as him, and P. Ryan is not an electric stud by any shape and game. This clearly is Joe Burrow's team, and this might be the last year they have Higgins, and they might go all out with him. Mm-hmm. So I love the passing game in Cincinnati. And then we start to see the introduction of the quarterbacks in this group. And in a single quarterback league, I don't look at quarterbacks until the 6th round. It's my own personal rule. Mm-hmm. You're doing super flex, different discussion. Start talking about them. Personally, I love Mahomes more than Allen.
Super flex, you're talking about them in the 1st round.
Possibly.
And Josh Allen or Mahomes is your number 1 pick.
I'm taking Mahomes over Allen. And the reason for that is that I don't trust Allen's recovery. And I know Mahomes is fine. I know Mahomes played with a broken ankle in the playoffs. I watched it and wanted Jacksonville to win that game. Mm-hmm. And it didn't happen. There's something about Mahomes. Even though I think that Mahomes is going to run the ball more and then Pacheco's going to get a bigger part of that game, I'd still rather have Mahomes because I know for sure when he's on primetime, he's throwing 4 touchdowns. Mm-hmm. They might all go to Kelsey, but he's throwing. And that's what he does. So Kansas City's in primetime the whole damn year, it feels like. And that's why I'd rather have him. But when I look at the other group, the names I haven't brought up yet, Devontae Smith has won me leagues before. The guy is so underrated. Same thing I talked about 2 days ago. My worry with Devontae Smith is Philadelphia redoing their offensive line, losing 2 offensive pieces, especially the best tackle in football, in my opinion. It makes it harder to put the ball downfield, and that's who Devontae Smith is for them. And Devontae Smith is already kind of one of those guys that's like 5 catches on 100 yards. It's like Brown's giving you the 10 catches a game. So that to me has risk of him just kind of falling apart. And I don't like that about him.
Down the stretch, he had a good stretch.
Oh, he had a great stretch.
There was a lot of games there where you're looking at 31 points, 20 points, 17 points, 21 points.
Because he scores. When he gets the ball, it goes in the end zone.
And that got a lot of people into the playoffs. And
won some leagues.
You say to yourself, is that what I want out of my 4th round? So in my 4th round, and I know a lot of, and this is just my way of thinking about things, you're solidifying your roster at this point in time, or you're taking more chances and you're taking the best value player available. There's you could conceivably have 3 starting running backs right now and no wide receiver.
Which I'd be fine with. If Olave is my number 1 receiver, I'll take that all day.
You could potentially have 3. No, I'm saying in general, as you can.
Yeah, you could have 3 running backs at this point. And if you're looking at this running back room, if I don't have a running back on the roster yet, to me, you'd have to take Pierce.
Well, so this is where I'm going to approach my rankings from. I'm going to assume that I either have 3 running backs or 3 wide receivers at this point in time, because this is how it's looking. Unless I know unless my league mates and unless you know your league mates pretty well, you're probably not touching Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes at this point.
Not in one.
You're probably going to wait till the 6th round to do something like that. I think it's still too early in a 10-team league, and it's particularly too early in a 12-team league to do this because you could probably win games and leagues with Daniel Jones if you
or Dak, yeah,
if you put your roster
Dak in the 9th
constructed
round
the correct way. The guy I'm not even thinking about is Javonta Williams.
Yeah, I agree with that.
He have somebody else draft him. Again, the same with Dalvin Cook in that respect is that, you're giving somebody else the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And that could pay off really well for them. But at this point in time, at least when we're speaking now in June, you kind of understand what Javonta Williams' injury has brought with it. The same goes for Breece Hall.
Mm-hmm.
The 3rd and 4th round is enough to take reasonable chances on players with minimal risks and high upside. We don't really know what Javonta Williams' true upside is at this point in time. Yeah. Like I said, we don't know what Breece Hall's true upside is, particularly after the injury. Mm-hmm. A true upside guy, in all intents and purposes, the true upside guy is going in the 1st round. And that's Bijan Robinson. That's the truest upside guy because you don't know, but you are projecting based off of his college performance. Mm-hmm. After an injury, it's really hard to project to see if that player, especially a player that uses speed, if they're going to come back and be as successful. So I'm not even if I'm desperate and I drafted 3 wide receivers, I'm not taking Javonta.
See, that is why to me Pierce has to be the option.
The two running backs here in this regards, I think would be running backs that you would consider in the 3rd round as well. Now, yes, Joe Mixon is much maligned. We spoke about this after his 4 or 5 touchdown game last year. And I said that he's not going to get another touchdown the whole rest of the season. You might as well trade him. Mm-hmm. For me, if everything that we think about Cincinnati comes to light and Cincinnati decides to run the ball as they get leads, then Joe Mixon, nice little turnaround here. Is backing him up now. Evans is a serviceable backup running back. I think could overtake him in certain respects. But if I'm looking at this list and I say, okay, Joe Mixon, Damien Pierce just got bigger competition from Devin Singletary down in Houston. Houston is
Singletary a competition?
Here's why I say that. Houston is not going to be getting a lot of leads.
No. No, they will not.
Houston, Devin Singletary provides you with value in the pass blocking game. If you want a lead, you're probably going to try at least to pass it with your young quarterback. Mm-hmm. In that respect, I think Damien Pierce is a bigger risk than Joe Mixon. He has potential for a higher upside than Joe Mixon, but I think his floor is a lot lower than Joe Mixon, because if you look at what Joe Mixon's stats are, I think he's going to get 1,000 yards, and I think he's going to get 6 touchdowns, 5 touchdowns. The problem with Joe Mixon is he wasn't utilized in the red zone at all last year, so his touchdowns had to come otherwise. And so,
I remember that game where he got the 5 touchdowns. They were on the 2-yard line. He had already scored 4 of them, and they did a quarterback draw to try to give one to Burrow. Like that, you just didn't want to give Mixon the ball.
So that's where my primary problem is with Joe Mixon. It's not that he's not a good player, good enough player. He's not elite in any respect. But if I went 3 wide receivers in my first 3 rounds, because conceivably you could have drafted Chase.
You have studs,
You could have Chase. You could have Diggs.
Waddle,
and you can have Waddle as your top 3 wide receivers.
That's going to be a strong team.
And you're coming back and you're sitting here looking at running backs. Well, Travis Etienne's probably fallen. You're sitting here looking at
all right, so on that note, have we finally got to the point where Etienne is clearly better than this whole group? Because I think we have.
I think out of these running backs here, I think Etienne is a guy that I would have taken in the top 30. I think I would have taken Etienne over, Hawkinson, Breece Hall.
But we finally got to the point where these running backs are distinctly not better than Etienne.
Yeah,
just looking at the backs.
I think the one that you would look at above Etienne out of this list could be Joe Mixon, but I think Etienne provides you with more upside than Joe Mixon does.
Etienne's also more vital to that offense, even with Calvin Ridley returning.
If we look at a player that I'm excited to see what happens with them because we'll see.
Because you're always excited about him.
Not really. It's the player that I'm talking about.
Oh, my bad.
It's Keenan Allen.
Yeah, dude, old man Allen. He'll
So-
get you a billion catches when he's healthy.
So let's pretend that he doesn't get hurt.
If he doesn't get hurt, he's a top 10 guy just
He's
because
a
of his
top 10
volume.
guy.
Yeah.
And
Keenan Allen, yeah.
let's pretend that he gets hurt first game of the season and
Well,
comes
that's
back.
another waste.
That comes back week 7.
He won't be the same. That's what happens to him every year.
Right.
He twists something and then he's hobbling.
I'm just going to do this.
When he's
for
out
you.
there, he's
Hold on.
so great, though.
I'm just going to do this for you because I think it's important that we find.
But I can tell you this: of this group, Allen is a safe option. He just has injuries, right?
Okay.
But it's a lot like the Ahmad argument before.
Yeah.
He's getting the target share.
So
Like, they're giving him the ball. He's got a great quarterback throwing it to him.
PPR, he played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 games last season. 10 games last season.
Okay,
164 points.
that's so 16 a game. That's the Keenan Allen threshold. It's not for standard leagues. It's for PPR leagues or half PPR because all of his value is reception.
If we're going deep into it and we're saying, okay, who's the guy that I'm willing to take a risk on if I feel confident in my top 3 already? But I wouldn't take him above Metcalf or Higgins. No, I'm not saying I would, but I'm saying that if I'm looking for an upside guy in this, and I think he's not your true upside guy like the Bijans, but because of the injury risk, I'm more willing to take a risk on him than I am to take a risk on Breece Hall. And here's why: that when I'm looking at Keenan Allen here, I honestly don't think Keenan Allen is going to go in the 4th round. He's probably going to get drafted in a lot of leagues in the 5th or 6th round.
Yeah, he's going to be falling
because of the injury concern, especially speaking that we haven't talked about Debo. We haven't talked about Amari Cooper. We haven't talked about Michael Pittman or Chris Godwin yet, or Mike Evans. And these are all guys that
are in the same realm as Allen, but they'll take higher than Allen.
That people are probably going to say, well, I'm not going to take Allen because of the injuries. But if Allen plays and if he comes back for your stretch run, you're probably winning your league.
Yeah.
But if he gets hurt in the middle of the season,
when does that injury happen?
You're probably going to not be in as good of a shape as you are.
So overall, would you rather take that type of situation with knowing the injury's happening, or would you rather have Dalvin Cook where it's like we don't know his snap count, but we know he's going to be healthy?
I would rather take Keenan Allen, and I don't think it's a fair comparison to the degree that I think.
It's a type of problem that you debate, right?
But I would say out of this list of players, the guy that I am most excited to see a full season play out of would be Keenan Allen, because he has the potential to be a top 6, top 7 player, just because the way that Justin Herbert throws him the ball. Now, to your point about Chris Olave. Chris Olave, out of all of the skill position players that are on this list, Chris Olave is in the best position.
He is.
He has he's undisputedly the best wide receiver on the team.
No doubt.
He is going to get the ball. Derek Carr
loves to throw
the ball. Yeah. And I would even say that for most leagues, probably when we get to July or August, and we will come back to this video in July or August to see if this is true or not, I think Chris Olave is gonna start being drafted in the 2nd and 3rd round.
He should be,
and he's probably going to be your 2nd wide receiver on most teams.
But if you're sitting here making a list, how can name recognition does not put Olave ahead of Higgins or Metcalf? And this is where I'm telling people, get past the name recognition. This is the year Olave's blowing up, and it's all because of the quarterback. He's got himself a guy who can put the ball downfield and loves doing it. I know most people did not watch Raiders football, and I understand why, but they threw that ball deep.
Well,
they did it a lot.
So for Chris Olave, and this stat's coming directly from Fantasy Pros here, is that he had the 8th best total air yards.
Yeah. That's amazing.
And that's with quarterbacks.
That's with a quarterback who can't throw the ball downfield.
Those are with quarterbacks that can't throw the ball downfield.
Andy Dalton cannot throw the ball the length of a car anymore. like an actual car.
He had 25% of the target share, and that was as a rookie. And they have more confidence in him now. And so when you look, we said specifically when we were speaking about the Saints are, if they are winning games, they're winning tight games, they're winning games late.
Not this year.
What they're going to see out of Chris Olave here is if the Saints are taking that division, just as we said, taking the clear best player from the team. We don't know if Alvin Kamara is playing yet.
We don't know if Williams is playing either.
We don't know if Williams is playing and how much he's going to play. Chris Olave is the clear best option here.
He's the best player in the division, without a doubt.
And we didn't even talk about T. Higgins or DK Metcalf. And the reason I'm not talking about T. Higgins is because I believe in most leagues, T. Higgins is probably going to go in the second or third.
Yeah, I agree with it. Same with Metcalf, probably.
Metcalf is probably going to get the same treatment just because of the way he performed last year. If you just take a look at the numbers really quickly. DK Metcalf is ranked performance last year was the 16th best wide receiver at 226 PPR points. And T. Higgins is not so very far behind that as the 18th best wide receiver. Mm-hmm. And so when I see that and I'm seeing that I can get those guys in the fourth round, mm-hmm.
If I get T. Higgins in the fourth round, do it without a doubt.
But if I know my audience and I know, the players that I'm playing with, then I'm more likely to take running backs in the first round. I'm more likely to.
This is part of my argument for taking running backs.
I'm more likely to take Saquon Barkley. Mm-hmm. I'm more likely to take, anybody that we mentioned in the first round.
Because we're here. We're totally okay taking any of those three receivers in this group. Mm-hmm. We're not okay with taking the running backs. And that, to me, this is why I'm a running back guy. This is why I'm a running back early guy.
But that's even to say, though, is that you may, and I've done this before, is I've drafted and I've been in the fourth, fifth round, and all I have is wide receivers because I have two flex positions and two starting wide receivers. So if I can start the four best wide receivers that I think that I could potentially start, because you could have, if we go back to our list here.
Well, see, here's the problem with that, Bob, because you're going to look around and say there are four legitimate running backs left that we have not talked about. But if there are essentially 12 starting running backs available in the league in terms of people that need to play,
right,
it gets really scary really fast. Start seeing people reach on Gibbs.
It gets scary, and I've done it, and I've won. And
if it works, it works. But you could be the guy who doesn't have a running back.
You have to hit.
Playing with Madison? Is that going to work?
There are some guys we haven't talked about yet that if you are a guy that, or a girl that would like to take,
do you really want James Conner?
I'm just laying it out to you. Here are the running backs we haven't talked about yet. J.K. Dobbins. Mm-hmm. We haven't talked about Kamara. We haven't talked about Connor. We haven't talked about Madison as much. We haven't talked about anything that's going on in Detroit. We haven't talked about anything that's going on in the Bears. So you're taking higher risks later on. But if you could field a team that could potentially look like Jamar Chase and Stephon Diggs and then Chris Olave,
mm-hmm. It doesn't really matter.
It's not really going to matter. You're going to have to watch and make the right moves.
Well, see, this is my argument, though, because even take Diggs in this. If I took two running backs and then I got Higgins, the gap between the running back you're going to get as your inevitable second running back and my gap between Higgins and Stephon Diggs isn't that much. This is why fundamentally I said I'm a running back guy. It's a scarcity equation. And for the same argument is why I also believe that taking Kelsey in the first round is valid, but never another tight end.
Here's what I want to posit to you, okay? Mm-hmm. There were 19 running backs last year mm-hmm. that scored over 200 points. 19.
Yep.
Okay. When you go to wide receivers in a PPR league, obviously in PPR league, there's going to be
some extra points.
There were only 23.
So it's closer than it seems.
It's closer than it seems because there's a couple players here like DJ Moore, Olave, and Zay Jones that were hovering around 190. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the same thing for running backs, your next best running back was Jerick McKinnon, then DeAndre Swift, then Zeke and Singletary. And so the difference, people make you believe that difference is much more.
Mm-hmm.
But when I look at this cream of this crop of in terms of running backs, and
the difference is once you get below about number 20 running back, it falls off a cliff.
Well,
once you get below number 40 receiver, they're in the same category.
Here's the cliff. The 7th best running back in PPR was Ramondre Stevenson, scoring 249 points.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else above him was 250 or higher. When you're looking at wide receiver, that same cliff is sitting around the same thing. Devonta Smith was number 9 at 254 points.
Mm-hmm.
And so the cliff, we want to believe that there is more value at the running back position because there's more running back. It's the same thing. It's just you have to think to yourself, how do you want to construct this team? And are you more comfortable coming out and going with a guy like Curtis Samuel, who had 176 points last year? Obviously, he's not going to be ranked that high this year.
Mm-hmm.
Or are you comfortable going with, let me get the running backs up here again. Are you more comfortable going with a guy like the same respect would be Jeff Wilson?
Yeah, see, that's why I'd way rather have the receiver than Wilson. You know what I mean?
It's the same points.
Well, here's my difference. It's the same points, yes. But the number 3 receiver on a roster is more valuable than the backup running back. Because I know the number 3 receiver on most teams is going to be on the field for at least 40% of the snaps. The backup running back ain't give that to me. That's my point about why I want to have bona fide. I'd rather have the snap percentage guys of the running backs than the split one. So I get a little more refined with it. But it's an important thing that you need to go through and realize. How do you fall upon this scale? And as a result, we both essentially discount quarterbacks and tight ends because tight ends, like I said, between basically number 3, some years number 2, and number 15, it ain't that different. It's just which flavor do you want?
Yeah, and for me, I've always been a fan of going after the players, and a lot of people do this, going after the players that are going to score the most points most weeks, regardless of their position, and trying to fill out your roster to that end. Yeah, I don't want to have Latavius Murray on my team. I don't want to have Jeff Wilson on my team. But if I know I'm definitively going to get 60 points out of 3 guys for sure every single week because those guys are Diggs and those guys are Chase and those guys are, Devonta Smith or whatever you want to flavor it as, I'm feeling more comfortable. And these are the questions that you start asking yourself in the 4th or 5th round, depending on how you've constructed your team. And so when we look at this specific rankings and we say, okay, who could be the home run? Who's our home run? The home run, obviously, for me in all of this would be Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen is the definitive definition of the home run, followed by Chris Olave. Those 2 players, out of all of the players on this list, are the players that, one, Keenan Allen plays a full season. He's probably going to be the best player on the Chargers.
He will be.
Chris Olave, he plays a full season with Derek Carr. Those touchdowns go from 5 to 12. All of a sudden, you've got yourself a first-round candidate in Chris Olave, and we'll be talking about him next year. T. Higgins and DK Metcalf, for me, are similarly in the vein where they're probably going to get drafted higher than they should, but not because they're not going to get the ball. But what we do know about DK Metcalf is his situation hasn't really gotten better for him in regards to, Jackson Smith and Njigba is there. Then we got Tyler Lockett there. They've got a good running game. It hasn't gotten any better for him.
See, I think Smith and Njigba hurts Lockett way more than I don't think it affects Metcalf.
I agree with that respect, but all of that still needs to be considered because if Gino's going to then develop a rapport, that's still targets that aren't going to go to DK Metcalf. Whereas in the past, if it's not going to Lockett, it's going to Metcalf. So, and that's just a very small summary of it, but it paints it in a different picture.
On that note, you're seeing, this is why I give the tiebreaker to Higgins over Metcalf, because you see Metcalf's target share potentially going away. Higgins lost one of the competition spots for targets. Now, granted, they didn't give Hurst a whole lot of targets in Cincinnati, but it still was a percentage. And you're seeing that Higgins is the one who's naturally going to step up to it. Plus Boyd, in all accounts, he's aging out, and they don't have a number 3 better than Boyd.
Yeah,
which to me means lean on Chase, lean on Higgins, win a lot of games with 1 million points, and that's based on the Bengals are built.
Yeah, and like I said, I logistically don't think that T. Higgins is going to be there in the 4th round.
No, but we got to deal with the list ESPN gave us. So let's rank it out here, Bob.
If I were to rank these players, just based off of what we've talked about, I think T. Higgins is the top in this department, basically because I don't think he's even going to be there. Followed by DK Metcalf. I don't think those 2 players are going to be here when you're drafting. Because people are really high on both of those guys. But retreating a little bit on that, I think DK's not going to be there, but I wouldn't put him at the top player in this grouping. T. Higgins is my number 1 because I think he's head and shoulders better than a lot of these players on here. Chris Olave is my number 2.
Okay.
For the same reasons that you stated. His situation is the best situation out of every single player on this list.
Is Derek Carr eligible for Comeback Player of the Year? Because if he is, I think he's winning it.
I don't know. But so I'm going T. Higgins. I'm going Olave. Then I'm going Joe Mixon for the same reasons that I stated, is that you're looking at a running back. You're looking at this situation here and you're saying, okay, well, if the Bengals are going to win games late, they're going to have to figure out that running game. Joe Mixon has had some trouble, staying on the field, being healthy, but he was still a top option last year. If he sees a positive movement in those touchdowns, I think you could see him as being a guy that you would even consider drafting in the 2nd or 3rd round. It's really weird to see Joe Mixon's name this low, because in the past he's always been fairly high.
Guaranteed 2nd round pick.
But I think this is where he should get drafted.
I agree with that.
So I'm ranking him towards the top of this ranking. So T. Higgins, Chris Olave, Joe Mixon. Then I've got Devonta Smith. He came on really hot at the end of last year. We're not really sure if the new offensive coordinator is going to use him in the same way. I think they should. I think he's proven himself.
I think remember, that was an internal hire.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be fine for Smith.
I think he's an efficient athlete. I think he's very proficient, and I think that you'll be happy with him on your roster. So T. Higgins, Chris Olave, Joe Mixon, Devonta Smith, DK Metcalf is then there at that next number. Like I said, I'm not really sold on him. I'm probably not going to draft him, but out of these players, that's where I'd put him. I'd put Keenan Allen next, knowing that he does carry that injury risk, and that's the only reason he's down this low for me. Otherwise, he'd be up a lot higher. Then comes Damien Pierce. Damien Pierce, for me, is a player to watch for. You definitely want to watch the camp situation. You definitely want to watch the OTAs, see what happens with him, because he could jump up the board and end up in the 3rd round in 12-team leagues especially. Guy I'm not even looking at would be Javonta Williams, so he's going to be the last for me in this. And then Mahomes and Allen, just because.
Well, which one do you have higher, though?
Mahomes and Allen.
Oh, so Mahomes ahead of him. Yeah, so we're going to actually, this might be the one we're most similar on. We do have difference at the top. Like I said, I think Olave is going to be finishing as a top 5 receiver in this league. I'm taking him in the 3rd round and probably considering him in the 2nd. And then comes Higgins, Devonta Smith, Metcalf would be 3 through 4 there. Number 5 for me is going to be Keenan Allen. Bob, you sold me. I mean, if he's healthy, he's there, and he's probably going to drop in leagues, and he's going to be so valued. All of these running backs, the more I think about them, I don't want. So therefore, it becomes Mahomes, then Allen. I would take Pierce over Mixon, but here's the biggest problem with Pierce. Stroud is not going to know what to do, and he's just going to start running for his life. You're going to not have as many. A, Stroud's going to steal running touchdowns for the few times they get down there. But B, they're going to be in 3rd and 2nd and long the whole season.
Right.
And he doesn't catch the ball.
I'm not even considering.
Yeah, so it's Pierce, Mixon, and Williams end this out. But quite frankly, Williams 100% is on my don't draft list. But the other 2 aren't far off of it. Like, I don't want to have any of that action when it's all said and done. And Mixon is one of these guys I fully disclose. Cincinnati might just be like, whatever. P. Ryan's gone. We're just going to ride Mixon until he's out, which actually looks like that might happen. And if that does happen, it's scary, but I don't see Burrow handing the ball off when he can play with those two great toys. I mean, he never really does anyway. So, and also, I guess this is the other caveat we got to throw in there. The AFC North is playing the softest schedule in the world. He gets to play the AFC South and the NFC South.
Yeah.
There is not too many defenses that Cincinnati is not going to be a 7-point favorite against, which when you look at it goes, Mixon might not be. We might be too hard on Mixon. That might be the long way short.
That's what I keep saying. Is that he's a guy that you probably just, if you're drafting with people that don't really look at anything and they just look at the books and they just look at the online stats and they see, oh, Mixon, he's going to go higher than this 100% because you know his name. Well,
I'm saying it might actually be worth it. Like Cincinnati could be winning a lot of football games.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.